There, Professor Jared Rathel, and I welcome you to Lecture 2-2, Descent with Modification by Natural Selection. In this short, and I promise you short, less than 20-minute lecture, I'm going to explain the nuts and bolts of Darwinian evolution, what it actually means, how it actually works. But first, I want you to check out this beautiful leafy sea dragon with all of these delicate leaf-like appendages covering its entire body. This species is perfectly outfitted to blend in with the seaweed and the kelp formations it lives amongst. This exquisite camouflage, it did not evolve in one simple mutation, didn't evolve overnight, but by tens of thousands of mutations over millennia, which gradually selected for certain individuals that were progressively better able to blend into their environments, better survive, and pass along their genes. So, recall that Charles Darwin's idea, descent with modification by natural selection, is actually a relatively simple idea, but it has profound implications. Darwinian evolution accounts for the incredible diversity of life forms that we see, and it explains that all of these lineages, they ultimately merge. They're related across vast stretches of deep time. His idea, described in painstaking detail in On the Origin of Species, rests on two irrefutable observations about the natural world, and then two logical steps forward. The first observation that Darwin makes about nature is that when we look at a population of organisms, and you recall that a population is a localized group of individuals of the same species that are capable of interbreeding. When we look at a population, we find that individuals vary in their traits. No two individuals are exactly the same. So check out this flock of pigeons. Some of these pigeons are iridescent in color. Some of them are dark gray. Some of them show mottling. Some of them have light plumage. And this is just a variation that we see on the surface in their plumage. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about a flock of pigeons or a population of pandas or people. Individuals vary. Consider the human organism. Some of us have dark skin tones, some of us have moderate skin tones, some of us have lighter tones. Some of us are brunette and blonde and redhead. Some of us have blue eyes and green eyes and high cheekbones and narrow noses, wide noses. The list goes on and on. Individuals vary, and people are no different. It's obvious, we can see it. Before I move on, I want to be really clear about one thing. There is not a shred of scientific evidence that correlates the tone of your skin with intelligence or behavior, work ethic. There's zero scientific evidence for any of that racist bullshit. So the reason why skin tone varies, it's a function of the amount of melanin. That's it, the amount of melanin that your body produces. Melanin is a pigment that protects human skin from harmful ultraviolet radiation. If your ancestors are from tropical or subtropical latitudes, there's been strong natural selection for the production of more melanin. If your ancestors hail from more northerly latitudes, then less melanin was selected for to ensure that the body could produce enough vitamin D on those short winter days. So racism is a completely human construct. Our differences are truly only skin deep. The second irrefutable observation that Darwin makes about the natural world is that females produce more offspring than the environment can support. In short, females over-reproduce. Consider the clutch of hundreds of eggs from a single maternal sea turtle. The vast majority of those young hatchlings will get creamed by cars. They'll get picked off by hungry crabs and seagulls. And there are many hungry fish waiting for the young when they reach the surf. So the vast majority of those hatchlings don't survive. If your cat or dog has ever had a litter of young, there's often a runt or sometimes two who don't make it. Wild canids like these bat-eared foxes that you see here on the right are no different. So depending upon the year, many of those pups won't survive to adulthood. So these two observations, that individuals vary and females over-reproduce, they're simply irrefutable. You can't argue against them. Even the most ardent creationists can't deny this. It's simply a fact of life. So next, Darwin unites these observations into a logical framework. He makes two subsequent inferences. It goes like this. If females produce more offspring than the environment can support, and these individual offspring vary in the traits that they express, this is going to create this natural disparity. Some individuals, because of the traits they display, are going to be more likely to survive and reproduce. Consider the famous peppered moth here on the left-hand side of your screen. Both of those individual moths are the same species, capable of interbreeding, but they have different traits. Clearly, they have different color morphs. So, imagine a forest fire rips through the forest and chars and darkens the trees like you see on the left. Which individual, the dark morph on the top or the light morph on the bottom, now has a better chance of surviving and reproducing? The black morph, right? So it has a much higher probability of survival, a lower probability of mortality because it's now camouflaged in this charred forest, like the leafy sea dragon. So avian predators, hungry birds, right, are going to be much less likely to pick the dark morphs off. Individual variation or different traits also implies unequal rates of reproduction. Consider the mountain gorilla. They live in these familial troops, and only the large, strong, dominant silverback breeds with the reproductive females. So for now, this dominant male is the male in this troop that is passing along his genes. The smaller, younger, subordinate male that he's wrestling with may or may not become the dominant male and end up passing along his genes. So that said, it's not always about strength and size. In nature, males always do the showing off, and females always do the choosing. Sometimes females choose not the strongest male, but the one with the best dance moves.
The character of the forest changes as you descend, becoming ever darker and damper, favouring different kinds of animals and plants. Less than 2% of the sunlight reaches the floor, but even here there is extraordinary variety. In the great island of New Guinea, there are 42 different species of birds of paradise, each more bizarre than the last. This forest is so rich that nourishing food can be gathered very quickly. That leaves the male six-plumed bird of paradise with time to concentrate on other matters, like tidying up his display area. Everything must be spick and span. All is ready. Very impressive, but no one is watching. The superb bird of paradise calls to attract a female. And he has more luck. But what does he have to do to really impress her? She retires to consider her verdict. It's hard not to feel deflated when even your best isn't good enough.
Most people don't recognize when they're watching that wondrous David Attenborough clip about the birds of paradise that what appears to be a mostly jet black male bird of paradise, at least to our eyes, what most people don't realize is that birds can actually see a fourth primary color in the ultraviolet side of the spectrum that our crappy mammalian eyes can't see. We'll come back to this, but the fish, amphibians, reptiles, and birds, they have cones, the cells that detect colors in the retinas that we don't have, that we've lost along the way. So, with those birds of paradise, there's probably an even more extravagant show going on in those feathers that we can't even see. Finally, Darwin recognizes that if there are differential rates of survival and reproduction, those individuals with the favorable traits, the traits that help them survive and reproduce, are going to pass those beneficial traits on to the next generation. Over thousands, millions of generations, the favorable traits will accumulate in the population over time. The population will better adapt to the environment which it's found. The population will evolve. Consider the blind cave salamanders. They're found in cave systems all over the world, from southeastern Europe to my home state of Texas. Their ancestors had fully functioning eyes, but long ago, founding populations splintered off from the population on the surface and made their way deep into caves, caves with no light. If you've ever been spelunking and you turn your headlamp off, you can't see your hand 6 inches in front of your face in a cave. So eyes become totally useless in total darkness. At this point, eyes don't help you survive and reproduce. In fact, they're energetically expensive to develop and maintain, kind of like those long, strong wings for birds on islands. Thus, a mutation that aborted the development of the salamander's eyes was strongly selected for. And now all of the salamanders in these cave species have this favorable mutation or series of mutations. They are all born eyeless. And it's not just the salamander lineages. There are blind cave fish, blind cave shrimp, blind millipedes and centipedes and spiders. Natural selection has exerted similar selection pressures on different lineages which have colonized these subterranean environments. Favorable traits accumulate in the population over time. Great. I hope you were entertained and I hope you learned something, and I very much appreciate you tuning in. Thanks.